Welcome to the GOTO Podcast. Each episode covers the brightest and boldest ideas from the world's leading experts in software development. Tune in for practical lessons, compelling theories, and plenty of inspiration. GOTO gathers the brightest minds in the software community to help developers tackle projects today, plan for tomorrow, and create a better future. Stay up to date with the latest in tech through GOTO's top-rated events held online and in person in cities like Amsterdam, London, Copenhagen, and Chicago, and by subscribing to the GOTO Conference's YouTube channel, where you can find thousands more high-quality dev talks. Learn more at gotopia.tech.
Hello. We are here now in the GOTO Book Club, and today I'm gonna talk with a friend of mine, Alexandre, because in English it's a kind of different, right? So just for you, if you don't know me, I'm Albert Tanure. I am Brazilian, but I'm living in the Netherlands, working for Microsoft as a cloud solution architect. And then, my colleague Alexandre is going to present himself because he wrote a nice book that we're going to discuss it today. Alexandre, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Albert. Yeah, most everybody has a trouble to pronounce my name. I used to live in Ireland and everyone calls me there like Alex. It was kind of my official name there. And so I just wrote my fourth book about .NET, C# and related topics. And it is a pleasure to share about my latest book here. And just to introduce myself a little bit, I have 17 years experience as a software engineer, and I played many roles in the field, like as an engineering manager, head of engineering, and software architecture position as well. And I am also a Microsoft MVP for 5 years in a row.
Yeah, this is very cool, man. And you said before that, first of all, thanks for joining this session. So as you said before, it's your fourth book. And this is going to be interesting discussion or talking because I wrote a book as well about ASP.NET. And then I believe your book is way more, how can I say, intense than the book that I've wrote because my book was more to the essential part. But modern full stack web development with ASP.NET Core. It's very nice. And I saw many great things in the book. And because it's your first book, you have more experience. Can you give some thought or about your process? How did you, I believe for all authors, this is way more difficult to structurize a book, even for complex topic, how to condense all topics into one book. How was your challenge? How was your challenge to structurize this book?
I think the hardest part of creating a book, deciding about the content and all the chapters and the entire content for the book is to decide what to cut in the book, right? ASP.NET, .NET, C#, software engineering, web development, full stack development. It's a large topic to cover. And in my book, the last one, I decided to cover apart from ASP.NET Core and .NET platform. I covered as well React, Angular, and Vue.js to make it harder to put in a single book. So in the process of creating a book, probably you pass by the same process in terms of deciding what to remove and what to change in the book based on feedback, reviewers, and professionals on the area. But I think when you got the final result for the book, it's kind of, you read the paper version of the book and you remember, okay, it's missing something there, something over there, and you can't do anything anymore, right? Because it's already printed, it's on sale, and it's this kind of thing. So it's kind of normal when that happens. And I think that happens like in the fourth books I wrote. So it is kind of part of the process. But one of the things that I learned over the years as well, over the past 5 years, I started writing books is that my book won't solve all the problems or cover the entire content for the topic, right? There are other books that readers can buy and to complement their knowledge about some topics. So I'm kind of in peace about what to do right now when I'm writing a new book. So that's completely fine.
It is very cool then you comment that, because you touch upon specific points. I believe it author has the same problem. Like I wrote, I'm going to read it now, but I missed something else. So should I do it again? Of course, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of contents available for different perspective. But based on your book, what kind of subjects you think now I should include it in the new version, or I miss because the context always covered the most important parts of the full stack perspective? Is there any topic you would like to, I don't know, put into this book and then you couldn't put it because about, I don't know, pages or the time?
Yeah, I covered apart from like beyond backend development for .NET API contents. And I talked about security and many other things on the backend side. I decided to include Angular, React, and Vue.js JavaScript frameworks because I didn't have any idea on the audience for the book or what they would like to combine in terms of full stack developments. So in the second edition of the book, I would learn which JavaScript frameworks the users like the most to combine with ASP.NET Core. I know sometimes, like I'm aware, like React is the most popular JavaScript framework right now, but it doesn't get the feeling for a second edition of the book, like to decide which JavaScript framework is going to be. But I would kind of reduce a little bit the size of the book to include only one JavaScript framework to demonstrate the integration between front end and back end developments. That would be the main difference. Like go deeper in a single one JavaScript framework, I would say.
This is very cool, man. Do you know, one of the great things I really enjoyed, or I like also from your book structure, it's if you look into the table of contents, it is in front of me because I not remember by heart. But for example, I like the way that you put the chapters as well. I've tried to do the same. But for example, we always look into ASP.NET, and then we have our UI frameworks, right? So we have Blazor, we have Maui, and so on. But most of the time, based on the community, we are, share knowledge. And then we also talk to people. They didn't realize the powerful to integrate ASP.NET Core with the frameworks, like you said, Vue.js, React, and so on. Is it possible? It's not so complicated. We have templates for do it as well. But I really like that foundation you built into your book. Like, as soon as you go after the Blazor, you move into the architecture. So this one is, how can I say? I'm going to build the best Blazor applications using architecture concepts to look into the components, to look into reusability and so on. But the other part, for me, it's considered by myself as a foundation for the rest. It's when you talk about the REST API, the REST services in part 1 and 2. So without that, it is impossible to talk about the frameworks you mentioned before, But this structure, it's very, very nice. And I really enjoyed the way to look into, for example, I'm not a React person. I have worked with Angular and Vue.js. So those help me a lot. But when I'm looking to the React, I don't know, the integration is very good in ASP.NET Core. I want to ask you, which one do you like mostly, Vue.js, Angular, or React?
Yeah, about like the foundation topics or chapters for the book, one intention I had when I was preparing the chapters was to, as we are talking about full stack developments, I wanted like the front-end developers who like don't know or don't have so much experience with backends, that they had the opportunity to learn backends. So if the reader doesn't have any backend experience, they would learn. And the opposite would be true as well in the book. So if the person is 100% backend developer, they would have the opportunity to learn front-end. So that was my intention, but it's a risky strategy as well, because a book usually has like maximum like 500 pages. It's a lot of content to include in the book. So I've worked with the three main JavaScript frameworks, but I prefer to use Vue.js much of the time because of the simplicity of the framework. It is not the most popular among the three ones. I launched many like releases to production using Vue.js, but in terms of integration between any of these JavaScript frameworks and backend, I think the process is quite similar. But if the person don't have any experience with these JavaScript frameworks, it's hard to learn the three of them, because the way to create components, to manage states, and to have a really good architecture in these JavaScript frameworks like differ a lot among them. I would say React is the much complex one. After that, Angular, and Vue.js is the simplest of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. In general, the React is, how can I say, the most important JavaScript framework for most of front end. This is, when you mention about the foundation, this is what I like mostly. For my opinion, is before you start to work with some technologies, instead of to look into the technology, it is important to look into the basis, the foundation. And then you can set the foundation. And then without that, the other topic is not going to make any sense for anybody. But you structurize the book in a way that, as you mentioned, I'm not a backend, I'm a front end. Should I use ASP.NET? I don't know about Blazor, but I'm going to learn. I'm not familiar with what is middleware and how can I leverage those features from ASP.NET Core. But now when I'm going to go to some framework that I really know, like Vue.js, let's say, I'm able to integrate both. Even if I don't want to develop something, I know now how does it work, because I can integrate better with backend if I'm front end, or with front end if I'm a backend. So this full stack, it's way more important than just thinking about isolated topics. But I want to discuss a bit about one specific chapter that for me, it's an important topic. It's related to the, let me get my notes, planning and structuring full stack projects. For me, this is an important chapter, and why? And of course, I would like to know about you, what you think, because for me, it's like, okay, I know the technology now. I know frameworks, but how can I structurize an application thinking like a full stack developer? So should I design? Should I look into pipelines, repositories, some strategies? So this chapter for me it's like, okay, now you have the tools, but now let me teach you how to use these tools in a real project to leverage the whole full stack process. Yeah, give me your impressions, what you think about it. And because for me, I'm missing sometimes contents like that where people is making sense about the technology and connecting the dots instead of just to say, okay, it's next. What are the most important subject you would like to share with people related to this topic?
Yeah, as in the book, I covered a lot of topics and many JavaScript frameworks, different approach for doing many things. I would say the best way to decide the architecture of an application and like if I have to choose one, the most important thing to consider when I'm deciding about a project, a full stack one or any software engineering project, is to look into the expertise of the team. So like doesn't matter if in the market React is the most used JavaScript like framework, or if there is a hype for Blazor and any other framework. If your team is specialized and it has released like many products in Angular, right? There is a trade-off here to judge and to consider when talking about like the decision of choosing specific technologies, or if we are going to use like DOM-driven designer or design patterns, or if we're going to host the application on the clouds or not, if you are going to use microservices. I think the skills of the team is the most important thing to consider when you are deciding which architecture and technology to use. In the book, this specific chapter is the last technical one because I wanted to mention there specific things that I had large experience managing teams and making business decisions for engineering projects as well. But I would say get to know really well the skills you have as a developer and your team is the most important part when deciding which technology to use. Like, doesn't matter which technology actually you are going to use. If you have high skills on that, there is a high chance that that project is going to go in a good place. And another thing that I mentioned in the chapter, it is the second most important point for decision is in my opinion, a good software architecture involves making something that facilitates the engineering team to change requirements. So we are sure that any software project is going to change. That's the only thing that we know is going to happen. We don't know if the project is going to succeed or if the company is going to make like a huge revenue with the projects, or if the products, like in the very beginning, we are not sure if the product is going to meet like the user requirements or the user needs, and many other points. But one thing that as a software engineer, we have to be sure is that the project is going to change. And if we know by experience that the project is going to change over time, we have to create and build an architecture that facilitates the engineering team to make changes. Mm-hmm. So there are many good practices about how to make reliable projects, high performance projects, and other good practices related to technology and how the application is going to look like. But I would say a good architectural decision is the one that facilitates the change which is going to happen in the future in any case.
Yeah, and then you said some important topics, like, for example, you showed how to use 3 frameworks. Let's say 4, if you consider Blazor, right? So what is the best one? It depends on your team. It depends on the challenge you have now. Maybe, I don't know, 3 frameworks fits well, but sometimes it doesn't work for some reason or for some preference of the stakeholders. But also considering, like you mentioned, the UI, UX, architecture approach, like architectural patterns, like you want to use monolithic approach or microservices approach. Every decision has some trade-offs, right? And then how to manage that, how to build your application according with the requirements. So for me, this is a great mindset for a full stack, because we are not concentrating always deliver like even an API based on the HTTP or component in a front end, but we are thinking about the entire solution. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, this is an important message for developers, because we are not working in silos. But if you look into your book, and then we can navigate into different areas, even for this chapter, navigate into different areas, so we can understand how to collaborate, how to consider the best technology, the best decision, according with the best architecture design. And we are preparing, you in this case, in your book, preparing the developers to look into that way instead of just to learn technologies. So to be honest, thank you for that, because this is a nice, the nice message for the developer community. And I believe you're right. As an architect, I can see, okay, sometimes I would like to use C#, but in this case, I can use different language because it fits better because of the requirements. So this chapter touch upon these items. And I agree with you. I love this project planning, agile methodologies you mentioned. We are missing something like that.
Yeah, and I included in the book as well the pros and cons of each JavaScript framework, because it depends on the size of the projects and the nature of the business requirements. A specific JavaScript framework is better than other. And about the correct use of architecture approach and agile methodologies and other topics, I think like this chapter deserves an entire book just about the trade-offs and like mentioning real projects or experience that I had over the past like 17 years working in complex projects and facing many problems. And in 2 of my books about design patterns, I included, I think, hundreds of disclaimers saying that the patterning needs to be used to solve a specific problem. If you don't have the specific problem, you shouldn't use it. When I was learning design patterns many years ago, I still learning, right? Because we have every year kind of many new patterns. But when I started learning design patterns, I made mistakes as a developer trying to include the pattern where the problem didn't exist. So I created a problem just to have an excuse to use the pattern, or I mixed like many patterns because I wanted to use the pattern I just learned. And it is the same mistake needs to be avoided by someone who is a backend developer and is trying to learn front-end development, because it is not recommended for a person who doesn't have any front-end experience to learn the main three JavaScript frameworks altogether, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to specialize and to choose one of them based on your context. But I mentioned the 3 of them because I didn't know the real audience for the book. If the reader follow the chapters and do all the step-by-step projects that are included there, the person would be able to create React, Angular, and Vue.js applications. Like the application is gonna be running without errors and it's kind of thing, but it is different from creating real applications to go to markets or to go to production, right?
Yeah, it is. I would like to highlight one topic based where we discussed now, because I believe in the last chapter, you talk about, you put some important topics, I would like to say. For me as an architect, when I look into that one, I say, oh, this is very nice. If someone is reading that, for example, disaster recovery, you just mentioned about nobody's looking to the disaster recovery because the disaster is catastrophic thing. But disaster can be, if you deploy something into the cloud with mistakes, you're gonna, I don't know, broken the API, nobody can pay anymore if they are online store. So this is a disaster as well. Or it can be in data center, it doesn't matter. But this is an important topic. And also when you talk about the pipelines, deployment, the monitoring and continuous optimization. So let's say we are changing the minds here. We are changing the minds from a simple develop to look into the holistic way. So we are not just burn a task and push the code, but you are taking care about your application because based on the data, based on the monitoring tools, you can optimize your application. And then you are taking care of the whole process. But this chapter for me, it's very, very important. If you are just a front end or back end, it doesn't matter. But for me, it's like you are creating here, and I would like to highlight and congratulate you about it. You are creating here DevOps mindset, in my opinion. So to be honest, this is an important topic and we should talk more about it. But again, you can write more books related to it just for architecture design partners, as you did, and monitoring and continuous optimization.
The main reason for any software engineer to be in a project should be to bring value to customers, right? Or to bring value like to real users and it's kind of thing. So could it be an internal user or a external one? That should be the mindset for a software engineer. And because of that, I think like today, there is no space for a developer who doesn't want to learn anything else apart from the specific thing he's specialized. So I'm a backend developer, right? But I know front-end developments, I know DevOps, I know database, I know cloud, I know software architecture. I think that's the way to go for any modern software engineer. Because if you don't know a little about like many topics, you probably are missing something. You are probably missing something that is gonna be problematic for the project. So if, for instance, if by mistake or lack of knowledge, a front-end engineer is making way too many API calls, like for something that doesn't change so often, or if a React application has like 45 components in a page and there is like the same data being shared among the 45 components, sometimes you see a developer, like developers who make like 45 API calls, like to take the information. And like this developer is not thinking about customer, like making value to customers, right? Or thinking performance application, etc. So there are ways to share data between components to avoid making too many calls. And sometimes front-end developers make this kind of mistakes because they have no idea how backend works, how expensive is to return API calls and to process like database queries and to scale up servers and this kind of thing. So it is important to know the whole process of software development. Since like the very beginning, the concept, business requirements, and like to software architecture, to infra decisions, until the point that the project goes to production. And it is about, for instance, disaster recovery and observability. So our responsibility as a software engineer is not like finish a sprint and deliver the feature we had responsibility. Our real responsibility is to make like users happy and to reach business goals. And it means that our responsibility doesn't end when we make a pull request. Is when the user is like, when the application goes to production and we validate the feature is kind of making value to customers. And it just is related to observability, to the capacity, the ability of monitoring the application, and to understand how deployment works. So it's not about learning Angular, Vue.js, and React. It's about being a good software engineer with great soft skills as well.
I agree. There's a lot of stuff after the push, but we could talk a lot, Alexandre, about those topics for long, because it's way more interesting discussions around it. But I really enjoy the book. I really enjoy to have you here in the GOTO Book Club. And I just would like to thank you a lot for the book, and also to thank you to join this session with us. Please feel free to say your last words in this session.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about the book. It's always great to have like technical discussions with you, Albert. And I really hope the book adds value to the readers. If you buy the book and you enjoy it, please leave a review on Amazon as well with your honest opinion, because that's gonna facilitate all the feedbacks, gonna facilitate the second, third, fourth edition of the book in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the GOTO podcast. Head over to gotopia.tech to discover lots more content from the brightest minds in software development.